Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I think it's hilarious, put it mildly, when you have, for instance, people who don't know really anything about the subject, but they come and they talk about it. Well, sometimes we make this kind of mistake, but I hope that we immediately recover and say, wait a minute, actually, I don't know anything about it. I should keep my mouth shut. I'm not saying you should not have an opinion, but sometimes when you don't know what you're talking about or you don't know what happened, if you don't know, the best to do it is not to take sides. Now we have Greta Thunberg. And Greta knows who blew up the dam in Ukraine. She knows that Putin did it. How she knows that? I have no idea. Okay, so here you have Greta Thunberg calls for Russia to be punished for ECOCIDE in Ukraine. So she knows that Russia is guilty. As I said, actually she doesn't know shit. Why? I don't know who did it. So you have Russia and Ukraine. One of these guys did it. If the Russians did it, the Ukrainians know that they didn't do it. They don't know if the Russians did it, they know they didn't do it. Unless they have information, secret, confidential. But now we have this problem. What if the Russians say, you did it? Who are you going to believe and why? We go to that conceptual stupidity of good versus evil. Good, evil. So you're not going to listen to evidence aside just by what the Ukrainians said. They don't have any evidence. They didn't present any evidence. The evidence is this. Our intelligence told us that Putin ordered it and they blew the dam. That's it. And everybody says, yes, we believe you. Why? Not even a preponderance of evidence to support the allegations or the statements or the, however you want to call it, accusations. Why? Because you always have to listen to what the other side said. And the other side says the exactly same thing. So Greta talks shit about something she doesn't know anything about. I would ask Greta, tell me how a hydroelectric power plant works. What's the principle? What's that little thing over there doing? And what's the thing next to it doing? Please give me some credibility. Can you tell me? She talks about ECOCIDE. I have another article, and I'm going to share it with you, obviously, where I have another person talking about the same thing, right here. Zelensky calls on the world to punish Putin for ECOCIDE. Is that the same thing this woman said? Greta Thunberg calls for Russia to be punished for ECOCIDE. Very interesting, isn't it? Because I need evidence. There's not evidence, I say because they said. Now it's a fact that Russia blew up the dam. Based on what? The Ukrainians said so. And the Russians are evil. So Greta, again, she comes over, says something without understanding almost anything. If I asked her about what's the political system in Russia, she would tell me that it's a dictatorship and probably a tyranny. She doesn't understand what's going on over there. I'm certain that that's gonna be Maybe it's not like that. But by coming out and saying that, just promoting that ignorance. How did the mass media determine it was Russia? They used common sense? Okay, let's say it's in Russia's advantage. Are you going to use the same logic in Nord Stream 1 and the Nord Stream 2 pipelines? Because if you use the same logic, then the United States did it. So we have a little problem here. You can't just pick and choose what kind of logic you use and based on the situation. Well, if that advantages Russia blowing up the dam, then blowing up Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2 advantages the United States of America the most. And they said they will stop it. Don't you think? Well, I think we get too intellectual here. Not that it was too deep, but this is such a low-level garbage that it makes me, how should I put it, in order to find, or at least to see if a rule is just, you have to do at least two things, which are kind of related. One, see if the rule applies equally across the board. And the second one, which is kind of the same, put yourself at the receiving end and see if going back, if the ruling was logical and factual and fact-based and all that, chronological and whatever, objective. And you're gonna immediately realize where the problems of logic and facts and evidence was up when your skin is in danger. Right now you're outside and you are okay. But I don't want to get too deep in this. I'm just saying that Greta doesn't know what she's talking about, but she's talking. Hey, I think I know. I think she might have read some articles. Okay, that's her evidence. Okay, those people who wrote articles, how do they know? Well, they read what the communiques from certain kind of sources had to say, like the Ukrainians. So they read what the Ukrainians said. Then the Ukrainians said, without providing evidence but this, the Russians blew up the dam. They mine it, they put dynamite inside and Putin ordered it. That's it. And this is our evidence. Our intelligence said so, and you gotta believe us. And that was made as a statement, released to the public, in their media. It was taken by free media, and Greta, right here, she read it probably, or maybe someone else read it for her. And the mass media, again, has no evidence, but they talk. They already determined that they did it. Why? Because the Ukrainians said so.
But wait a second, I seem to remember NATO and Ukraine testing out the idea of blowing up this dam last year. It was even featured in the Washington Post. The idea was to stop Russia from advancing. So this was in the Washington Post, where they specifically highlighted Ukraine using HIMARS launchers to attack this dam. You cannot make this up. Kovalchuk considered flooding the river. The Ukrainians, he said, even conducted a test strike with HIMARS launchers on one of the floodgates of the dam, making 3 holes in the metal to see if the river could be raised enough to stymie Russian crossings but not flood nearby villages. The test was a success, Kovalchuk said, but the step remained a last resort, so we're not going to do it just yet. Washington Post has a feature article about how Ukraine was planning on blowing up this dam to slow a Russian advance. It's amazing how this all comes together, doesn't it? Almost like hoping we'd forget that this was in the Washington Post. So they already told us they were going to do this. Just like when they told us they'd blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. And then they did it. And then they tried to blame Russia even though Joe Biden told us he was going to. Victoria Nuland told us that they were going to. So in addition to blowing up the dam, just up the river, of course, is that other target, which is the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. I mean, again, this river is vital to the cooling of the nuclear power plant. It's been under constant shelling by NATO forces for the past year. We found HIMARS shells being used to attack the nuclear power plant, which has been under control of Russia since March of last year. And they've been using HIMARS to attack all over this area. But don't worry, the Atomic Energy Agency says, hey, the IAEA says nothing to worry about here. It's all fine. We've got it under control. Listen.
Today, the Nova Kakhovka dam was severely damaged, leading to significant reduction in the level of the reservoir used to supply cooling water to the ZNPP. The cooling water is required for the essential cooling systems which provide cooling to the among other to the following: residual heat removal from the reactors, spent or partially spent fuel there, residual heat removal from the spent fuel ponds, cooling of the emergency diesel generators when they are running, absence of cooling water in the essential water systems for an extended period of time would cause fuel melt and inoperability of the emergency diesel generators. However, our current assessment is that there is no immediate risk to the safety of the plant. We are following this by the
day. We're following this by the day. Great.